to More Creative. I'm your host, Ashley Wiley, and today we talk with Josh Steadman, a production and set designer with over 20 years of experience in themed entertainment, working with clients such as Disney, Marvel, Cartoon Network, and more. Throughout our conversation, Josh navigates us through the challenges that he faced in pursuing his creative career. We hear about his education, early career success, and the eventful path he took to achieve his goals. This was a really insightful and inspiring conversation, and Josh gives us some awesome advice on what it takes to turn your passions into a career. I hope you all enjoy this one. Josh, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you on.
It's great to be on.
So you've had a really amazing career in the entertainment industry, and even when you were younger, did you know that you wanted to pursue a career in design?
It was the only thing I wanted to pursue a career in. Speaking for myself, I can't speak for everyone else, but I was pretty stubborn about who I was, what I wanted to do, and to actually follow through on design. Now, having said all that, life path sometimes curves and winds and dips and does all sorts of weird things. So it wasn't a direct path by any means. I knew ever since I was a little kid, I'd heard that there are people who design theme parks and people who built Disneyland. I knew it was a real thing. I was fortunate and lucky enough to grow up with the Disney Channel as a small kid in the early '80s, and so they would showcase things they were working on the Disney Channel. And Disney Channel used to be really, really, really great, like old Mickey Mouse cartoons, and then it would be interspersed with these little Imagineering snippets. And when I saw that that was something you could do, I knew immediately that was what I was going to be. I grew up in Idaho, and I've shared this on other podcasts and other interviews. My parents had 6 kids. We lived in the farming community of southern Idaho, so around a lot of potato farms and dairy farms. I did not grow up with financial privilege, so that type of lifestyle was very foreign to me. It was always about hard work. When you grow up in a farming community, um, more or less on a farm, you learn to work really hard as a young kid because the farm exists because everyone's pitching in. So um, that was the world of which I was from, and it was the world that I knew. More or less, the path was we went to Disneyland when I was a young kid, and I remember very distinctly seeing things that were really intriguing. And somewhere, and it wasn't at Disneyland because a friend of mine corrected me a little while ago that it wouldn't have been there when I was there as a kid, but somewhere, somehow, and it might have been on the Disney Channel or something, I saw this image of this clock they used to have out in front of Tomorrowland, and it looked like an hourglass. It had spokes on it with time frames around the world and a sundial. It was a giant sundial. So the planet, the Earth, the orb, this metal orb sat on the top, and the sunlight would hit it, and somewhere on the ground on the pavement, it would give you the time frame or the time of the day in some other country on the Earth. And I remember seeing that image or seeing it in a video form, and I remember as a young kid going, "What a great design!" Going, "That's amazing."
Wow.
Who designed that? I remember it sticking in my brain at a really young age. We're talking like I was 6, maybe 7, and I would draw it. I would doodle it. It made an impression, and I knew from that moment that that was something I wanted to do. I wanted to design parks. So, Little Jerome, Idaho, that's where we lived, and I remember the teacher, Mrs. Butler, asking us in second grade who we wanted to be when we grew up. And I said I wanted to design Disneyland. And being in second grade in Jerome, Idaho, everyone's like, "Wait, what? What's that?" Not a wealthy area. You live in a farming community. People are very, very salt of the earth, and it's all about basic living. And I remember everyone thought I was a very strange person. I think I still am a strange person. I'm just a better stranger person, right? But being a kid saying those things in southern Idaho in the middle of nowhere, it was very foreign for everyone else. It wasn't foreign to me. I knew then that's what I wanted to do. And like I said, the path afterwards was not easy by any means.
Having that mindset at so young of an age, did that have a major impact on where you decided to go to school?
I always had high hopes, and they weren't always realistic with my economic situation or
Mm-hmm.
where I was. But I always really aimed really high. So there's a school in Eastern Idaho that had a really fantastic illustration program, and coincidentally, the professors had all gone to Art Center College of Design in Pasadena, which is a great art school and a great design school, and it has a really great reputation for being one of the best art schools in the world. And doing my own research in high school, I'm like, I'm going to go to this college, this undergrad college, and I'm going to study art, and I'm going to be an illustrator. And so I really only applied to one place in undergrad, and it was this particular school. It used to be called Rick's College. If that isn't like as Idaho as it gets, I don't know what else to say. But it's now called BYU Idaho. It's part of the BYU circuit, and they have 3 or 4 schools, universities out of Provo, Utah. But all my professors had been at Art Center and were teaching at this private junior college. And these guys were like incredible illustrators. And they were all freelance illustrators. So I had 2 graphic design professors. One taught color and design, the other one was a graphic designer. And then this real famous, very well known illustrator named Leon Parson, who was a wildlife illustrator and had done hunting magazine covers and had lived in LA and worked in publishing. So having that exposure at 18 years old, 17 years old, and starting college in 1995, that man and those professors taught me how to draw. I mean, I had always grown up drawing, but it's not until you go to art school and you're actually get the discipline that you need to be a real designer and be taught design. No one knows those things until you're taught them. And I think having mentors that really trained me in drawing skills, but also trained me with color and color theory and all the things that you need to know to be a designer and to do it really well. And then I transferred, actually applied to Art Center and got a advanced scholarship, which was very rare. In those days, in 95, 96, Lucasfilm and George Lucas was gearing up to shoot a movie called The Phantom Menace, which is, the Star Wars prequels. I grew up on Star Wars. So I was going to go to Art Center, and I wanted to learn like Ryan Church and some of these guys that all are Art Center graduates that are concept designers and have designed modern sci-fi and everything that we know now. 20 years ago, they were kind of reinventing a wheel to make these movies, and they were setting a precedence. And so Art Center offered me an advanced placement. I could not afford Art Center though. So I graduated with my undergrad in illustration, and then literally packed up my car. I've done this a few times, so this is the first time I packed up my car and I drove to LA, was waiting tables at Johnny Rockets and sneaking into courses and classes with my buddy Mark Stahman, who also went through the illustration program. Coincidentally, Mark is a gallery artist and a really talented one these days. But I was sneaking into classes. He was a fully registered student. I couldn't figure out how I was going to pay for school, and waiting tables at Johnny Rockets selling hamburgers and hot dogs and dancing to ABBA was no way, shape, or form going to be paying for my education. So I remember going to figure drawing and getting kicked out night courses with Mark because I literally I could not afford the education. Coincidentally, I had applied to BYU Provo, and Brigham Young University Provo had a really strong illustration program, but it makes sense because they were segueing students from Rick's to BYU Provo and building up this very well-known traditional illustrative design course. My professor, Bob Barrett, and he said, you should really apply at BYU. We'd love to have you as a student. So backhandedly, I'm not even kidding, I didn't want to keep going to BYU schools. I wanted to go to art school. And he was like, you should really come to our school. They offered me an art scholarship. And so I left Johnny Rockets and I left my idea and this crazy dream of going to Art Center and I went to BYU. It was the best decision I could have made given my financial situation. I mean, I didn't have like a lifeline. I couldn't just call someone and say, "Hey, can you give me $120,000 in 1998 to go to Art Center?" So I went to BYU on an art scholarship, and I said to them, part of the reason why I wanted to go to Art Center was their concept design program there to be a designer for film. My idea was I was going to segue and take that into theme parks. I should back up and say I had gone to Disney World and worked before my Art Center application, worked on the Tower of Terror as a bellhop. I was so crazy about understanding theme parks and how to be a theme park designer. I had applied for the college program and went and spent 6 months. I had to audition to be a bellhop. Back in those days, Michael Eisner was president of the Disney company and required everyone to audition for their roles that worked on Jungle Cruise, Haunted Mansion, Tower of Terror. I did it for two reasons. Number one, I wanted to work in a park to understand what it's like from the ground up. I think most people who become or are considered knowledgeable experts in whatever field they are start in the ground. They start in the trenches. And I tell this to students all the time because I get young people graduating now calling me and they're like, "I want to be an art director. Where and when can I start? Can I start tomorrow?" And I go, "Okay, crazy town, back it up because you've got to start in the trenches somewhere." So you become good at what you do because you start from the ground up and you work your way and you listen and you're nice and kind to people and don't burn your bridges and do things the right way so that you understand how the process works. And that's what I did. So I worked on the Tower of Terror, and I remember actually working Phantasmic crowd control. I sold churros at a churro stand. And then one day they threw me in the Mulan parade and said, "Hey, you're going to carry this banner." And one thing led to another, ended up being in the Mulan parade, marching down Hollywood Boulevard in Disney MGM Studios at the time. But it was a lot of fun because I was able to glean knowledge from all these areas working operations for a theme park. And maybe I'm old school by saying this, but I think most people who work in theme parks, the best colleagues I've worked with, understand how the operation side work. You got to understand how those people are going to operate, how crowd control is going to work to be able to understand how to design it anyway. And so it was an amazing experience. I mean, I did that before I went to BYU and before I was sneaking into courses at Art Center. But then at BYU, they allowed me to write a program, in a loose program in entertainment design. And I was kind of making up my own thing in the illustration program. There were only 20 of us in the program. It's very exclusive. But Bob Barrett and Beth Ann and Richard, my professors and mentors, allowed me to do this thing and do what I thought would be theme park design. I didn't know what I was doing. I was making it up, and I was making it up based on the resources. Now it's interesting. There's all these programs now that are actually teaching indoctrinated entertainment design, which is like, I'm so jealous. I wish that existed when I was a student because I didn't know what I was doing. I was making it up. There was no textbook on how to do any of that. And I wasn't living in Southern California. I'm in Utah. So I graduated, became the first to graduate with a undergrad degree in entertainment design emphasis under the illustration program.
After graduating with that degree after undergrad, what came next for you?
So September 11th was very fresh. It's funny that it just happened yesterday. When I graduated from BYU, September 11th was fresh. No one was hiring artists or designers. And I've had a lot of young people reach out to me wanting advice what they should do in the meantime until things pick up. Prior to COVID, the entertainment industry was booming, was going crazy. And that was only a couple months ago. So it's surreal to me that we're in a very similar situation that I was 2003, graduating from BYU with September 11th super fresh and no one hiring artists. So to answer your question, what I ended up doing, I answered an ad in the student newspaper wanting wilderness survival therapists to go work in the woods and work with kids and mentor teenagers that needed mentors from all walks of life. And so, and I grew up going to Boy Scouts, which I couldn't stand Boy Scouts, only because I didn't ever really fit in. I had to audition very similar to being in Boy Scouts, knowing how to tie certain knots and rope lines, how to make a shelter, cook on an open flame, how to start a fire with a top rock, a spindle, which is a stick basically, and making a bow out of a branch to create the friction to get a coal and blow that coal in the flame. Um, and all my colleagues and coworkers that were doing this at the same time, which is a mixed bag of us because we were all unemployed. We had all finished at BYU or in local schools in Utah County, and we were desperate for work. So I took this job. I was 25, and everyone, all of my colleagues, these other recent graduates, placed bets that I would never make it. I'd never last in
Wow.
that line of work. I ended up doing that work for 19 years actually, on the side, part time, while I was going to graduate school, while I was studying to be a set designer for television, and while I was chasing this crazy dream of being a theme park designer. I was working in the woods with teenagers, um, taking them hiking through slot canyons and all sorts of things. And I would disappear with these groups of kids and other staff for weeks on end, teaching them how to live off the land. It's such a polar opposite thing of who I am, but there was something really fantastic about, number one, helping people, and helping people that needed emotional stability. It provided me stability that I desperately needed. And then, oddly enough, while I was in the desert working with kids, it gave me all this downtime to draw. So I would take out sketchbooks and draw. And then I was designing a ride attraction, to submit in the Walt Disney Imagineering Imaginations contest based on a Disney property, which, I picked a movie and I got my good friend Katie Taggart involved, my brother Luke Steadman, and my best friend Brian Crosby, who he and I worked together in Ecuador and were Mormon missionaries together in Guayaquil in 1996. So, the reason why I tell all this is, and Brian is now the creative director at Marvel Entertainment. We've both been Imagineers, and it was that project that I was designing in the desert as a wilderness therapist that got us to where we're at now. So I'm in the desert and I'm drawing this idea about a ride system and a ride idea for based on my favorite film, Disney film, The Rocketeer. And so I'm doodling all this stuff on my off weeks out of working in the desert. Me and my brother, mostly my brother, I should say, would design these ride systems. We had this idea that you would be strapped into this thing that would fly you like a flying attraction. There was nothing like this in the market, with binaural audio helmets that you would put on. And it was basically the Rocketeer. And you got this backpack that was built into this flying coaster contraption. Um, and it would lift you up, and then you flew through movie screens. So the movie screen would be on a track lower than you. You were hanging from like a gimbal type system that Luke and I had worked out. Luke really did all the technical specs and drawings. He and I talked through it to come up with the idea and the concept. But these screens would be on tracks below you, and the screen would split, and you'd go into actual set pieces. So kind of like if you've been on Harry Potter, through the castle,
Mm-hmm.
Hogwarts, you're in a Kuka arm that turns and focuses basically on moving set pieces, right? So it's almost like cogs in a clock, right? That attraction on a track. We were coming up with something very similar to that, and this is before Hogwarts and before Universal did Harry Potter, but it was all based on the film The Rocketeer, which, Cliff Secord finds a rocket pack that Howard Hughes has designed. We built that storyline into our ride system, and the idea was you were test pilots for this rocket pack, and you got to test flight these, 1930 style Howard Hughes invented rocket packs. Um, Only you end up in all this, you end up in an air circus and all sorts of things. So we were doing this ride design on the side, and then I got a job offer to teach high school and teach high school art, working in the desert, out of the desert, so I didn't have to live like a nomadic wanderer anymore. Um, and I taught at a high school in Murray, Utah, and they allowed me to teach and write a curriculum for teenagers and junior high aged kids, all on what I wanted to be, which was an entertainment designer. So I made a course and wrote the curriculum. How to, you had to create a character, and the character had to then go into either comic book, or you could do fashion illustration, or you could do all these things. And at the end of the semester or the course, I say semester, but I think we were in a block system at the time. The kids had, but that's what I was attempting to do. And I got a call in my office, and it was Walt Disney Imagineering, and we had submitted this Rocketeer design, and they said, "You guys are finalists. We're going to interview all of you."
Wow.
The short version of that story, my brother and I were disqualified for. We were
Oh no.
disqualified because our work, they thought we had cheated. Um, they said our work was too good, and there were other things, a bunch of stuff, whatever. But the good part that happened of all this, it actually got me super motivated and hell bent to get my work into people's hands, so they knew the work I was creating was mine. They knew I don't lie, I don't cheat, and I don't steal. I just don't. So that it was my own work. Brian actually interviewed with Imagineering because he was local and a few other things lined up for him. They offered him the internship at WDI. At the time, to get an internship at Walt Disney Imagineering was like, yeah, it was like 1 in a million chances. Like if you had to really pick, it just didn't happen. It was like, how do you get there? How do you become an Imagineer? It was nearly impossible. It just doesn't, it didn't happen back then. Being super hell bent, I'm like, I don't care, come hell or high water, I'm going to be an Imagineer, and I'm going to do this thing. So I got online and started looking up Imagineers that I respected that could draw, because that's what I do. I like to draw, right? And I found a guy named Don Carson, who now coincidentally has been on several podcasts, and he has an Instagram following. And I mean, the guy's amazing. But he had worked on Toontown with his buddy Marcello Vignali, and then another friend of mine. All these people, not by the way, have now become really good friends. I didn't know these people from anywhere, and I was literally shooting in the dark. Hopefully, I'll find someone that will see my portfolio and give me a shot, give me a chance. The summer that I was digging around online and looking for artists, I contacted Don Carson, who then referred me to Kathy and Steve Kirk, who were the creative directors and producers on Tokyo Disney Sea. They got me in touch with Tim Kirk, their brother, who then Kathy, Tim, and Steve brought me out to LA, and I had breakfast with them, and they looked at my portfolio, and Kathy was so kind. She's like, you know what? You've got chops. You can do this. I'm going to refer you to someone else, and let's see if we can get you an interview. I'm like, okay, great. While all that was happening, on the same trip that I met with Kathy, Steve, and Tim, I drove to San Diego and went to the Comic Con. This is in 2004, maybe 2004, 2005. And I took my Rocketeer portfolio to the guy who actually created the Rocketeer. His name is Dave Stevens. And I grew up reading the Rocketeer comic book, so he was kind of a hero of mine. And I saw him at the con, and Brian Crosby is actually with me. He's like, you know what? There's Dave. I dare you to go talk to that guy. And I see him in an aisle in the Comic Con. I'm like, I can't go say hi to him. No way. He's like, Steadman, if you don't go say hi to that guy, you will forever regret it. You'll forever regret it. So Cross and Kelly, his wife, they wandered off, and I went, okay, I'm going to do it. And I took my portfolio, sweaty palms, everything. And there's Dave Stevens, who wrote the comic book The Rocketeer. And I go, hi. And he was sitting there. No one was talking to him. I go, my name's Josh Steadman. I mean, we're talking like I was such a geek, right? And I'm like, can you please look at this? And can you give me some feedback?
Oh my God.
I was 26 at this point. Um, I have to say, I have to interject, and this is where I'll shoot out my personal opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Young people finishing art school, my biggest words of advice for those people are always stay hungry. Number one. Number two, stay humble. You can be good at what you do, but it's the mentors in the industry who are going to teach you something you don't know. And my advice to those young people is to always listen and learn. Be willing to learn. That's why you're hungry, because no one wants to work with a young person who just got done from art school who thinks they're all that in a bag of chips. It
Mm-hmm.
just doesn't work, and it will stint your career hardcore. I've worked with quite a few in the last couple years at places like Evermore Park and things like that. And if you're a little diva, I don't ever want to work with you ever again. And I can only say that because I've made that mistake myself in my own career by making people upset, and you don't always realize you're doing it. Um, but I will say, when I was that hungry, I just listened. I just needed to be educated in a way that was industry standard. Um, and the industry is not in places like Utah. It's in California. It's in New York City. It's in Seattle. It's in these places where the industry is people in television, people in film, people in theme parks, and they're going to teach you a few things. You've got to just listen. So here I am, Dave Stevens' desk, and I go, can you just look at this and give me some pointers? And so he opens up my portfolio, and I remember I had them all screen printed in this really fancy font and all this. And he's real quiet, and he pages through it, and he shuts it, and he goes, son, you're a hell of an illustrator. He goes, what do you want me to tell you? I I'm a pretty sensitive person. So I literally, here I am, 26-year-old man, and I just broke down crying. I'm like, you have no idea. You have no idea what you just said to me. Like, you just changed my life. Like, my God just told me I'm a heck of an illustrator. And so he was like, never stop drawing, I think was some of his advice. He said, your work is fantastic. I go, I have one more thing. Can I show you something else? He goes, absolutely. And I pull out a Rocketeer portfolio that Brian, Katie, Luke, and I had been working on. And I had this idea to make it look like an old comic book. Um, all in kudos to him, the guy who created it. So he goes, what is that? I go, oh, it's this thing. I've been working up a ride design. And he goes, let me see it. Let me see it. So I give it to him. I gave him a copy, and he gave him a copy of our portfolio. And the guy was like, this is awesome. Disney ever gets to build this, I want you to know this is awesome. So it was so inspiring because it gave me all the I needed to keep going when you're doing things on your own, you don't have the financial lifelines. I wasn't married. There was no one else I could rely on. It was just me um, trying to make it. So fast forward a little bit, I ended up packing up everything in my car in Utah, selling everything else I had that wasn't important. And I had this piece of crap car. I drove to LA. The Kirks referred me to a company called Thinkwell that's had literally 12 employees at the time. And I got an art department internship with Thinkwell when they were a brand new startup. And these people gave me a shot. And it was because of the Kirks, like because of a relationship with someone that I reached out to. By the way, too, when I met with the Kirks, I think I had $150 in my wallet. I went and I bought a bunch of coffee, a bunch of orange juice, and donuts, because they were being so generous with their time. So
Mm-hmm.
anyway, I got this internship, and it kind of set me off on my path. At that point, coincidentally, Brian Crosby was working. He started as an intern in Imagineering. Then I started as an intern at ThinkWell. My younger brother Luke was still in school, but then I decided I needed further education. I was a good enough illustrator. I wasn't a great enough illustrator. And I knew I needed to take that knowledge. If I really was serious about being a theme park designer, which all of a sudden I was in the stream of people, right?
Mm-hmm.
I needed to really accentuate my education and my career. And so I went, this is when I applied to graduate school. I took the portfolio I had with the Rocketeer stuff, all that in it, and I hustled it to Cal Arts, and I went to UC Irvine, met with Doug Goheen, the professor that was teaching set design down there. I sent it to Rutgers. I sent it to University of Connecticut, and they all offered me art scholarships, design scholarships in set design for theater. UC Irvine offered me a pretty good package deal in a TA ship, a teaching assistantship, where you're kind of owned by the university and they hold you to a standard, and you
Mm-hmm.
can't do other things. You can't take other jobs. You're theirs and you're teaching other students to get a discounted education. And so I did. My first day of class at UC Irvine, Doug Goheen, who I had chosen to study with this guy, and I had never designed for theater, mind you. So my background was traditional illustration, storyboarding, stuff like that. Um, Doug he goes, "You're a really good illustrator. I need you in my program. I've got 5 girls. You'll be my only guy in the set design program, UC Irvine. And I think you're going to be a good mix for these ladies who are, by the way, some of my dearest friends." So he brought me in. First day of class, he announced his retirement. It
Oh
was
no.
2007. 2007, the economy was getting ready to burst in a bad way. So talk about setbacks from an economic standpoint. Like, I graduated right at September 11th, basically. Started graduate school right at the beginning of the economic burst when real estate crashed, the economy crashed. So Doug saw it coming and he goes, "I'm announcing my retirement." And I just put my head down. I go, "You've got to be kidding me. This is why I came here, you know?"
Yeah.
I actually decided from there to just learn as much as I could from the man. I ate the cost of grad school for 1 full year. And then after a year at UC Irvine, I transferred to UC Davis um, to study with a man named John Iacobelli, who is very famous in the industry as a production designer. He designed Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, the movie with Joe
Wow.
Johnston. I mean, he's done a ton of stuff. And John had me work in television, which is another part of the story. I got in TV because of Yock. But my first year of grad school, I started winning awards for set design. I'd never designed for theater. Coincidentally, the girls I was going to school with all hated my guts because I could
Oh
draw.
no.
Well, I mean, now I'm inseparable with these ladies. So
It
they're
worked
some of
out.
my dearest friends. Yeah, it all worked out. But it was a really interesting year of school in that I learned a lot. And then Giacovelli saw a show I designed. I applied for the student Emmys based on this show that I designed and was nominated for a student Emmy that year. And then designed in Europe with a theater company that was out of UC Irvine called Transversal Theater Group. And we went to Poland, um, and I designed for the Gdansk Shakespeare Festival, and we won Best in Show. My set won Best in Show that year. So I started getting recognition that I wasn't used to. I kind of found my path, which was, even though I was an illustrator, even though I wanted to be a theme park person, theater kind of really solidified it all for me. Kind of was like the glue that brought it all together. Then I went to UC Davis, studied with John. John put me on television, and I've told the story in the last 2 weeks. I worked on Lincoln Heights as the art department PA, and then I was the PA, and then I became the art department intern. Coincidentally, on that show, there was this actor called Chadwick Boseman who was the boyfriend, and I had lunch with that guy. He became Black Panther for the Marvel films. So the people I was rubbing shoulders with were like incredible professionals. And it was an incredible experience, like working in TV, doing all these things that help you become a better designer. And they just kind of like add to it. Right? It's like Tetris, right? You start getting more and more experience in the bricks stack. You get the next experience, which teaches you something new that you didn't know. And not just about your skills, but about you, your personality. I finished with graduate school. I was hired by one of my former students working in private school. I taught him art, and he hired me to be his creative director. He came from money, so I got to work with this guy who had a lot at his disposal, and we were designing apps right out of grad school. From there, I started working on another television show. Was contacted. Actually, Yacovelli referred me. So once again, don't burn your bridges, because the people that you meet, you get endorsed by these people, and one thing leads to another. And they go, "Oh, does anyone know a really great theme park guy that does this? Yeah, call Josh Steadman." That's how it works. 90% of what you do as an artist is how hard you work. I don't know if that's an accurate percentage, but it makes sense. It's 90% effort, 10% talent, and then it flips. Then becomes 90% talent, 10% effort, and it's more about your personality. It's all about if people like you, if you get along with people. And so one thing has led to another. I worked on Wipeout with ABC per John's endorsement. I worked on 6 of 8 seasons for Wipeout on ABC as a illustrator, and then they had me do some scenic design, some production design. Then I did prop designs, did all sorts of stuff with ABC for Wipeout, and then a company out of LA that designed big events called me up and they said, "Hey, we've got this thing with Jay-Z. Are you available?"
Oh my
So I
goodness.
worked on this. It got crazy. I was working on a concert thing with Jay-Z. Then that led to Battlefield 3. I was designing weapons and vehicles for Battlefield 3. Um, Gosh, I did some music video designs in between all of that too. It's just one thing happens after the next, and then all of a sudden I got a call from Walt Disney Imagineering, and that crazy dream that I had ever since I was a little kid all of a sudden became real, and it was surreal.
When you finally broke into the entertainment industry and you were getting all of these opportunities from so many different places, how did that feel finally from everything you'd gone through to get there?
Validation, first of all, because you're like, wow, okay, I can actually do this thing that I talked about, that I've wanted. And it becomes, like I said, it becomes less about the talking, more about the doing. It felt pretty amazing.
So then, branching from there, how did it feel to get a call from Disney, this company you'd been dreaming of working at since you were 6?
So here's what happened. My friend Nina, I talked to her one day, and she worked on Toontown. She worked on Winnie the Pooh Tokyo. She's an incredible illustrator, and we had gone to lunch, and she's like, you should reach out to my buddy Bruce Vaughn. I'm like, I don't even know who that is. She's like, just shoot him an email. So I did. I went home, shot him an email. His secretary called me and was like, Bruce would like to meet with you. I'm like, okay, great. Next thing you know, I'm at WDI and I'm sitting in Bruce's office, and I had no clue the man was president of creative for Walt Disney Imagineering. The reason why I didn't know is because I quit pursuing Disney. I quit pursuing that dream. And so Bruce was amazingly cordial, took me on a whole day tour, took me to lunch, and then introduced me to all these people. And then the next thing I know, I had 2 follow-up interviews, one with the people doing Mickey Avenue, the production team on Mickey Avenue, because when you're building a giant park like Shanghai, there's pockets of teams, and they have producers, production managers. They have all these people working on this team. designing it and getting the drawing packages done. Everything that's built starts in a drawing format, right? Starts in blue sky from concept. Then you start doing things like technical drawings because then it starts becoming real and it goes through all these revisions. And then they are making models, paper models, foam core models, then color models. And Disney's extensive. They build everything out. They want to make sure everything they're doing is going to look as great as it possibly can. So they interviewed me, Mickey Avenue did, and then I met this lady named Doris and Michelle, her production manager. And it was funny. Mickey Avenue had all these people in the interview I had with them, with Joe Kilinowski and a few other guys. There were like 4 people in the room, 5 people plus an assistant. And then I meet with the castle team, and it was literally Doris and Michelle. And I'm all, okay, I don't even know what the project, I had no clue it was the castle and Doris. Michelle and her sitting there in front of me, and she goes, I looked over your portfolio and she goes, I think you're the one I want. I'm all, okay.
Whoa.
And I said, what does that mean? She goes, I think I'm going to put you on Castle. You're going to be my production designer. And I went, what? It was so crazy. And I went home and I literally fell on my knees. I couldn't, honestly, it was so surreal. It was like, you've got to be kidding me. This thing that I've wanted ever since I was a kid, um, this thing that in all the stories I've told you, there's a few stories I didn't tell you, which was, and I've told these stories on other podcasts and whatnot. Um, I was dirt poor, like to a degree that's like, I didn't know how to explain poverty, but I didn't come from money. I didn't come from anything. It was just me relying on me. Occasionally, my mom would send me $100, and that was a big deal. So, like, I was living in my car. Um, did that twice on 2 very big occasions. I was eating junk food from, you know, gas stations, and I've said this before. I was showering at a local gym to be in Burbank, to get to that point. I mean, in like a 12-year period of time. So I went back to my apartment and I just couldn't believe the path. I will say and tell you that I believe, and I know this to be true, that if you actually want something that so much that you can taste it, and you're willing to put in the effort and the hard work, things happen and it will be what you want it to be. I don't believe in being a slave to my reality. There was a time where I was, and it was horrible. So I'm now at a point in my life where telling the story, and I've told the story a lot, uh, going through the rigmaroles of trying to get there was painful. I wouldn't wish it, literally, seriously, would never wish it on my worst enemy. But I try really hard, on that note, to always just be kind. Like I said, I've made a lot of mistakes. I will tell you too, the Disney experience was off and running. So it was surreal getting there. And then all of a sudden I was in it, and you do not have a life. They're hard projects. So you get on one of those projects, you work, eat, drink, and sleep, work. Like at least I did. Because what else was I gonna do other than go to the gym? It was gym, draw some more, draw till 2 a.m. Oh, we have a conference call with China at 7 a.m. It was crazy. But also because I was such a yes man, I kept taking more and more scope. I would never suggest to anyone to ever do that. Like I was on Mickey Avenue, I was doing windows on Mickey Avenue, I was doing AO scope designs, I was doing weather vane designs. They just kept throwing more stuff my way because I was willing to do it and I thought it was really cool. Then I was doing the walkthrough for the castle, conceptualizing that. That was the crux of most of my work, was that project, conceptualizing it, storyboarding it, coming up with the storylines with Pam, with Doris, Michelle, with Jeff, building a mock-up in full scale, the whole thing with John Snoddy and all these people and David Allen and on a soundstage across from DreamWorks in the dark in the heat of the summer for 8 months on, making sure it was approved by John Lasser, making sure it was approved by John Snoddy, making sure it was approved by Bob Iger and all these people, and then taking on the assistants for mosaic tiling for all of Gardens of Imagination, working on Fantasia Carousel, making sure the drawing package was accurate, that the horses were accurate. I mean, I don't care what anyone says. It was so much work, and I was loving every minute of it. It got really hard when we relocated to China. China is a different animal. The culture is very different. The hard side of that project amplified by 50% easily. I would never take on another overseas project unless I go with someone that I trust, meaning someone important in my life, to have someone there with me. And I was envious of anyone who got to do that on that project, because you are on site, you're on an airplane, you're going up going up a ferry to go look at horses in a carousel factory, and they're using river clay to sculpt the horses. There's so much to say, and it was an incredible, I wouldn't take it back. It was so informative. It was life-changing to actually be in the field and be doing all of that. Doing it in a foreign country, I think anyone can really communicate how hard that is.
Well, yeah, I mean, you weren't just a part of the team bringing a project to life, you were bringing a brand new park to a country that had never had anything like that before.
They had no exposure to the Disney brand.
Mm-hmm.
What exposure they had was so I've been lucky and fortunate in that I've lived in several foreign countries now, nearly full time. And you make stupid mistakes, and you're young. And then at the same time, you're having this incredible experience, and it was amazing.
So, how long were you working in Shanghai?
I was in Shanghai for 3 years,
Wow.
um, business tripping for a year before the 3-year mark. So, all in all, my time at WDI was a little bit less than 5 years, but I started in 2011 and then came home actually January 2nd, 2015.
At that time, what were you thinking? Were you thinking that you were done with theme parks?
I post that project. I made a stupid mistake and took a project right after that, and I wasn't ready for it. You have to understand, Disney projects aren't, like I was saying, they're massive, they're enormous. They take a lot of wind out of your sails. You have the amount of scope. I had a lot of scope on that project. So I was touching a lot of different items and designing a lot of different things and then watching them get built. It was a lot of work. So there are people who can do it, and they'll build a park and then they'll jump on the next park project. I highly do not recommend that, because it does take so much work and so much effort that if you're not careful, burnout is very real. And I was burned out. I was more than burned out. I burned out while I was still in China, which I don't recommend that either. So when I talk about mistakes, that's one of the big mistakes. It's like you got to be able to monitor yourself and make sure you're doing things the right way, that you're taking care of yourself, your mental health, your emotional health. So I came home and I took on another project out in Singapore, Malaysia, and I shouldn't have done that. That was a bad idea. It was a bad idea. I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to jump into another park project. And when you talk about mistakes, you got to be willing that you made a mistake and admit it. And then you've got to be able to go back to the people that you've burned really badly and go, so sorry. And I've done that.
When you returned after, what were your goals from then on? When you looked at the rest of your career, what did you want to do?
There were many times, Ashley, I didn't want to work in theme parks anymore. I took a break after I made that mistake and took that project out in Malaysia and Singapore. I actually worked with kids again in the desert. I was like, that job got me emotionally where I needed to be, I'm going to go do that again. And I did. I went back into the desert, started working with kids. I needed help, meaning I just needed a break. I needed a break from the madness of being in entertainment. So I spent almost 3 years back in the desert. And then I got a call from Cartoon Network to work on a big cruise ship. And so I ended up going to Hong Kong, working on this boat, doing all the entertainment level designs for this boat, working with the creative director in Hong Kong. It was a lot of fun. Writing the programming aspects of what would be on that boat, what would guests experience. When that wrapped, I came back to the US and I had been meeting and swapping emails with a guy named Ken Bretschneider, who was building a themed living experience park called Evermore. And I had a friend, Josh Shipley. And so between Josh Shipley and Ken, they got me on Evermore. And Ken gave me the full liberties to hire a team that I saw fit for the production design and the build and the show design for this new park. So in 6 months' time, we designed, me and my team, I hired 2 interns from BYU, one from UVU. So here I am. I went back to the universities with Josh Shipley and we recruited kids from the programs I went to and went through to come and intern on a real park. I made a install program to get us to the opening finish line. And I hired 2 guys that worked in local television. There's a lot of TV and movie sets that are built and filmed in Utah. So I hired these 2 guys from this show called The Outpost on the CW. And I said, hey, this fits the vernacular and aesthetic. I'm hiring you. And it was downtime between shooting for the next season. So hired these 2 guys. I hired a set painter that had worked on a lot of local scenery stuff. He worked on Planet of the Apes with Tim Burton, worked on all sorts of stuff. His name's Chad. And brought him in to paint all the scenery. And he goes, I only work alone. I'm like, okay, that's fine. As long as we make the deadline, I don't care if you're working by yourself. So let's just get it done. And then hired guys to sculpt foam. We had all this foam that needed sculpting and installed. We had a mausoleum set that needed to be installed. So luckily I had this guy had worked in video game design named Miles, incredibly talented fella. Let me tell you how you build a park. You hire people better at it than you are. That's how you build anything. You want to build it the right way. You want to get it done. Walt Disney knew this. You hire people better than you. And Steve Jobs, there's quotes about him saying that. You want to build something amazing and get it open? I have no problem admitting there are a lot of things I'm not good at. So you hire people better than you and you empower them, you inspire them to do it as best as you can. And some of the coolest moments in my career were on Evermore, giving pep talks to my team, because it was psycho. We were working around the clock to get Ken's vision open on time. We were sculpting giant pumpkins, hand carving little fiberglass pumpkins. We had 8,000 pumpkins with individual faces carved.
Wow.
Not only were we opening the park for its park endeavor, we were opening it with all the Halloween decorative on top of it too. And we also had a giant booth at the local Comic Con Fan X that needed to look like the park, aspects of the park. So it's about doing things as a team so that the ball crosses the finish line. That's the goal. The goal is to build something awesome, get something open. Evermore was both the most amazing experience, and then it got really hard because we had a limited budget and things kind of started falling apart. But some of the coolest experiences I've had in my career, other than working on Shanghai, was building Evermore Park and opening it.
You're also writing a book about all of your experiences. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I've been writing this book. It's mostly, I would say, the framing is my theme park career. The story, though, is about sometimes self-help, getting the help that you might need emotionally, mentally, spiritually, all those things. I've had an interesting career. I've had a more interesting life. You make mistakes along the way and you learn from them and you wish to never repeat. And that's the book. It's called Worlds Fall Apart. It's all about all that. It's really about being an artist and designer in a non-artist designer world. How's that?
So, looking forward now, what are you most excited about? What are your goals?
That's a really great question. Just producing more really great stuff, fun things. I think I'm like in an emotional place and a spiritual place in my life that's pretty safe and healthy. And I would say it's the greatest accomplishment I could possibly recognize is that I've reached a level of solitude that I'm really happy to have. And it allows me to be a better designer and a better person in general. The world is in such a weird place. I think the invite that I have for anyone, especially in this field of theme parks, is life is so short and you meet people for purpose and for reason. I believe in that. So learn from them. Do things together, do things awesome, make awesome stuff, and be nice to each other in the process. And I think that's my goal.
Wow, I think that's a really great goal. So, I do have a couple questions that I like to ask everybody that comes on the podcast to end. So, if you had any profession that you'd want to do or try other than your current one, if you didn't have to worry about school or money or anything, what would that be?
I'm kind of a natural teacher. I like teaching people, and I'm patient enough because there are a lot of people that weren't very patient with me. So I've made it kind of a mission to be patient with others that I'm teaching and instructing. So I'd probably say a professor or a teacher, but if I had to really pick a really cool profession, it would be something foreign. It would be exploratory. It would be interesting.
Well, honestly, listening to your story today, it already seems like you're kind of there. You're already an explorer, breaking crazy boundaries and doing awesome things. So, my second question is if you have any advice on how to turn your passions into a career, what would that be?
I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier on, like be humble enough to listen and learn. Learning it is a process. Doing it is also a process. It takes time. It's about failure. Failure, I've learned more from failing, and I'm really grateful I did. You cannot avoid it. It's a part of life. It makes you better. There is no other option. You have to fail to get better.
Wow, I think that's definitely something that is super important for anybody trying to pursue whatever they want to do. Josh, it was so awesome to be able to talk with you and hear your story today. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for listening. If you guys like the show, please subscribe, leave a rating, and comment on whatever platform you listen on. It really helps out the show. For more information or to learn about future guests, you can also find us on Instagram at @TheMoreCreative or on YouTube at More Creative. Again, thanks for listening, and I hope to see you next time.